This is one of the most joyous days in the Easter season where we are bathed in God's love. In the first reading today, we hear of Peter coming to the realization that God's love is not just for the Jewish people, but for all people of all nations, you and me included. In the second reading, we hear that God, it isn't about our love for God, it's about God's love for us. And that if it weren't for that love, we would have never been created. And finally, in the gospel, He gives us a command to love one another. We are truly and completely bathed in God's love today. It's been a while since I shared a personal story with you, and I'm going to do my best to keep it together and to share one with you today. It's a story about putting this homily together and what it made me realize in my life. You see, although it's a joyous day in the readings and we're being bathed in God's love, when I started reading these readings, Kate and I were on a journey together, sitting side by side, and she read the readings and handed them over to me, and I read the readings and I began to cry. And she looked at me like I had two heads, which she often does, and asked me what was wrong. And I said, I'm very sad when I read these readings. And as I began to try to explain it to her, I began to sob. And what I explained to her was this story that I want to share with you. And that is going back almost exactly a year in time. Things in my life were looking really good. I'd worked for 22 years building a company, and I was just getting ready to sell it for a price that I'd always wanted to get for it. I was also running a nonprofit foundation to help single moms. And things were going very well there as well. We were helping moms get back on their feet, single moms back on their feet. And within the span of just a few days, things turned tragically. Just before the company was supposed to close, the sale of the company was supposed to close, 4 of my most trusted employees came into the office and said, we want more money or we're leaving. And almost in that same week, as I recall, we found out that the executive director of the nonprofit foundation was extorting funds and providing fraudulent information to the board. Now, the sale of the company went through, and all is well and good from that standpoint. The nonprofit foundation has been put into hibernation for a short time. We're still helping the single moms that were working for the foundation. But those events of those few days changed me. They changed the person that I was, and I was no longer that same man that Cardinal DiNardo ordained 2.5 years ago. Because I became a man that said, in almost all situations, if only. If only people were who they said they were. If only loyalty wasn't skin deep. If only you could really trust people. If only. And when I read these readings today, although a tremendous amount of joy and love exudes from these readings, I read these readings and my reaction to them was, if only. If only people really did relish God's love. If only people really did live as if they believed that Eucharist is indeed the body, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ. If only. That realization came to me as I began thinking about this, and the tears start coming and the sobs start coming, because the realization is, my brothers and sisters, that's not who I want to be. I don't want to be an if-only person. somebody who sees the negative, who fails to trust first. It's not who I want to be. And I saw multiple aspects of myself coming to light, realizing that these things are separating me from God's love, and also realizing that in my ministry as a deacon, I cannot give what I have not received in God's love. I had this cute little saying that I had come up with. Somebody would ask me, "Mike, how you doing?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm better than I deserve." And it would get a chuckle, and it was kind of cute. But as I was reflecting upon these readings, I realized that that's really how I felt. I really felt like I was better than I deserve. And it began to really eat on me. My own unworthiness, I became quick to judge others. I had become skeptical and cynical. And I don't want to be that person. It's not the person that I'm supposed to be. So as I continued to prepare for this homily, I went back to what I know in my heart. I know in my heart that life and love and happiness are choices. They're choices that I make every day. That really came home to me just a few weeks ago when I went on a trip down to Trinidad with my second son, Kevin. And we had to take kind of a red eye to get down there. We had to wake up very early in the morning to drive from the Port of Spain to San Fernando. And this taxi driver picks us up in the morning at like 3 o'clock in the morning. We sort of drag ourselves into the cab, and I look up and I ask the cab driver, "How you doing today?" And he turns around with the brightest smile that you've ever seen, and he says, "I'm wonderful." And I couldn't help myself, so I had to ask him, "What makes you so wonderful?" And he says, "Well, why shouldn't I be wonderful? I live in paradise." Now, if you've ever been to the Port of Spain, especially recently, it's not safe to walk the streets there at night. This man has got a job where he has to get up at all hours of the morning and drive people to God knows where. And he's living just above the poverty line. He's got a job I wouldn't want, and yet he turns around and looks me in the face and says, "I'm wonderful." That hit me on multiple levels.